At 6:32 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning that would end up changing my entire life, I was flat on my back in a damp utility crawl space. The air smelled of rusted copper, old dust, and 20 years of accumulated grime. I was holding a digital multimeter in one hand and a heavy flashlight between my teeth, trying to trace an electrical feedback loop. The issue was in the main power panel for the second-floor server room. Preston Cole, our brilliant 38-year-old CEO, had recently authorized a new $50,000 security integration system. The problem was that his fancy consultants had wired it directly into the same circuit breaker that handled the primary database cooling units. Nobody had checked the amperage load. Nobody except me. I knew every wire, every conduit, and every shortcut taken by contractors when we expanded the office space in 2012 and 2017. I had kept this place running through power surges, freezing winters, and sudden pipe bursts. Yet, at that exact moment, I had no idea that in less than 3 hours I would be standing in a conference room being told that my services were no longer required. My name is Arthur Vance. I am 56 years old, and for 21 years, I have been the chief building engineer at Apex Digital. I started back in 2002, when the company was just 5 guys, one dial-up internet connection, and a leased office space above a noisy Thai restaurant. Back then, we worked on folding tables and dreams. Today, Apex Digital occupies 3 floors of prime downtown commercial real estate, employs over 200 people, and fills its offices with Herman Miller chairs that cost more than my first truck. Preston Cole, the current CEO, took over the company after his father, Randy Cole, retired 4 years ago. Unlike his father, who was a practical man who respected hard work, Preston is all about branding, venture capital, and looking important. He thinks facilities maintenance is just an unnecessary expense on the company ledger. Every single morning for more than 2 decades, my routine started the same way. I would unlock the building front doors at 6:45 a.m., exactly 15 minutes before the cleaning crew arrived. I used a heavy brass key on a steel ring that held 13 other keys. Every key was labeled in my own faded handwriting, representing a different part of the building's anatomy. The main elevator bypass, the rooftop chiller access, the basement water mains. I kept those keys close, knowing that without them, the building was just an expensive concrete box. I did things that were never in my job description. If a pipe leaked in the kitchen, I fixed it. If the break room refrigerator began to smell, I cleaned it out. I did the dirty work because I believed that taking care of the small things was how you built something lasting. My father, who spent 40 years as a machinist, always told me to do the job right or not do it at all. I still keep his old 1952 Craftsman toolbox in my garage. Its red paint chipped, but the tools inside still oiled and perfect. That toolbox is worth more to me than any corporate title. Things at Apex Digital started shifting when Oliver Pierce was hired as the new HR director 6 months ago. Oliver is 28, wears a gray Patagonia vest to work every day, and speaks entirely in corporate buzzwords. He likes to talk about synergy, optimization, and cultural alignment. He once called me into his office to ask why we were spending $2,200 a year on specialized water filters for the server room cooling loops. I explained that without those filters, mineral buildup would destroy the pumps within 6 months, costing the company $30,000 in repairs. He just stared at me, nodded, and said they were looking for ways to streamline operations. I knew right then that guys like me, who actually worked with their hands, were becoming invisible to the new management. The email arrived on Monday afternoon at 4:58 p.m. It came from Oliver Pierce with the subject line, "Quick Operational Sync." No other details, just a calendar invite for 9 a.m. the next morning. My gut immediately went cold. I had spent enough years in offices to know what a sudden, context-free HR meeting meant. I did not sleep well that night. On Tuesday morning, I showed up at Conference Room B at exactly 9 a.m. I wore my clean navy work shirt with the faded Apex Digital logo embroidered on the chest and my black work boots. Those boots had walked every square inch of this building, through floods, renovations, and late-night emergencies. They were my armor. Oliver Pierce was already sitting at the table, a paper folder open in front of him. Next to him was a young corporate attorney with slick-back hair and a sharp suit. Oliver gave me a tight, professional smile. "Greg, thanks for coming in," he said, using the nickname I had hated for years but never bothered to correct. "We are going through a process of operational modernization, and as part of our strategic realignment, your position is being eliminated." The attorney then slid the folder across the table toward me. I opened it. It was a standard severance agreement. They were offering me 3 months of pay in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and waiving my right to sue for age discrimination. I looked closely at the paperwork. The cover letter was addressed to Arthur K. Vance. My middle initial is J. 21 years of service, and they could not even get my middle initial right on my termination letter. Furthermore, the contract contained a clause that demanded I hand over all personal notes, diagrams, and blueprints related to the building's infrastructure. "We will need your badge and all building keys today," the attorney said, his voice flat and robotic. I looked at the keys resting on the table next to my bag. These were the keys I had carried for 21 years. I had personally rekeyed the entire third floor when we took it over in 2015. "Are you absolutely sure you want these keys right now?" I asked. Looking directly at Oliver, Oliver gave me another rehearsed, sympathetic nod. "Yes, Arthur. We need to secure the facility as part of the off-boarding protocol. It is standard company policy." I reached down, unclipped the heavy steel ring from my belt loop, and placed it on the glass table. It made a loud, heavy metallic clink that seemed to echo in the quiet room. "You just fired the only person who knows how to bypass the main electrical grid when the city power fluctuates," I said quietly as I stood up. "Good luck when the summer heat waves hit." I did not sign the severance papers. I picked up the folder, walked out of the conference room, and did not look back. I walked down the carpeted hallway, past the rows of cubicles where young employees were typing away on their laptops, completely unaware of what had just happened. I walked out the front doors of the building into the bright morning sun, feeling a strange mix of anger and sudden quiet clarity. They wanted me out. They wanted their keys. They had no idea what they had just unlocked. I did not drive straight home after leaving the office. Instead, I pulled my truck into the gravel parking lot of a quiet diner about 3 miles away. I killed the engine, leaned my head back against the headrest, and just sat there for a long time listening to the hum of the highway traffic. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing through the details of a document I had not looked at in years. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I knew by heart. Ryan Finch answered on the second ring. Ryan was my neighbor's boy. I had watched him grow up, helped him fix his first bicycle, and paid him to mow my lawn when he was in high school. Now, he was a sharp real estate attorney with a small office downtown and a reputation for being meticulous. "Arthur, is everything all right?" Ryan asked, his voice filled with concern. "Not really," I said. "Oliver Pierce just fired me. They wanted my badge and my keys, and they took them." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear the rustle of papers on his end. "They fired you? After 21 years? That is unbelievable. What about the lease, Arthur? Do they even realize?" I let out a slow breath. "No, they have no idea. Preston Cole is too busy looking at spreadsheets, and Oliver is too busy talking about operational efficiency. They did not even check the file." Ryan let out a low whistle. "Well, that is $1 million mistake. Let me pull up the file on my server. Come by my office when you are ready." I drove home, parked the truck in the driveway, and went straight to my garage. The space was organized exactly the way I liked it. Hand tools hung on pegboards, spare parts were labeled in plastic bins, and in the corner sat my father's red Craftsman toolbox. I unlocked the heavy top drawer, reached past the neat rows of socket wrenches, and pulled out a thick, yellowed manila folder. I carried it over to my workbench, wiped off a speck of dust, and spread the contents under the work light. Inside was the original lease agreement from 2002, along with 7 signed amendments. In 2002, Apex Digital was nothing. Randy Cole, Preston's father, had begged me to help him secure the space. The landlord wanted a guarantor with established credit, and since Randy had just gone through a difficult divorce, his personal credit was in ruins. I was the one who signed the lease as the sole tenant. Over the next 2 decades, as the company grew, we signed amendments to expand into the upper floors. Every single amendment was drafted by the landlord's office and sent to me for signature. The accounting department at Apex Digital simply paid the monthly rent invoices that I approved. They never once asked whose name was on the legal agreement. They just assumed the company owned the rights to the space. I turned to page 12, section 9B of the lease. It was the Jiahan clause. It stated that any renewal of the lease term required written notice from the lessee to the landlord no later than 30 days prior to the expiration of the current term. The current lease term was set to expire on August 1st. Today was August 3rd. The deadline for submitting the written renewal notice was July 1st. I knew for a fact that no notice had been sent. Preston Cole and his executive team had spent the entire month of June in meetings preparing for their upcoming public offering, talking about how they were going to disrupt the market. They had completely forgotten to check the foundation of their own office. According to California Civil Code Section 1946, because the lease had expired without a formal renewal, the tenancy automatically converted into a month-to-month agreement. This meant that either the landlord or the tenant of record could terminate the lease by providing a written 30-day notice. And I was the tenant of record. I sat there at my workbench, looking at the signatures on the document. Randy Cole's signature was right next to mine from 2002. Randy had been a friend, but he had retired to Florida and sold his shares to his son. Preston had no loyalty to the past, and he certainly had no loyalty to me. He had thrown me out like a piece of broken machinery. I picked up the phone and called Ryan back. Ryan, I have the lease in front of me. Section 9B. They missed the July 1st deadline. It is a month-to-month agreement now. I see it on my screen too, Ryan said. And since you are the only lessee named on the agreement, you have the legal right to terminate the lease. Under California Civil Code Section 1946.1, we can submit a 30-day notice of termination to the property manager. Once that 30 days is up, Apex Digital has no legal right to occupy the building. If they stay, they are holdover tenants, and we can file an unlawful detainer under California Code of Civil Procedure, Section 1161, to have them evicted by the sheriff. Is that fully legal, Ryan? I asked, wanting to be absolutely sure. I did not want to break any rules. I wanted to use their own rules against them. It is 100% legal, Arthur. They fired the tenant who holds the lease. They are essentially trespassing on your leasehold estate. If you terminate the lease, the property manager will have to lease the space to someone else or negotiate a brand new lease with them at current market rates, which are easily 3 times what you are paying now. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the dusty rafters of my garage. A slow, cold feeling of determination settled over me. I had kept their servers running. I had kept their lights on. I had paid the cleaning crew out of my own pocket some months when the corporate credit card got declined, and I had simply submitted expense reports later. I had run the utilities under my own accounts because the city utility company required a personal deposit back in 2005. I could have called Preston. I could have warned him about the lease. But then I looked at the termination letter they had handed me, with my name misspelled. I thought about Oliver Pierce and his smug smile, telling me I was being modernized out of a job. Draft the notice, Ryan, I said. We are terminating the lease. I will have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning, Ryan replied. We will deliver it directly to the property manager's office. I hung up the phone. I walked over to the small refrigerator in the corner of my garage, pulled out a cold beer, and took a slow sip. For 21 years, I had been the shield that protected Apex Digital from its own incompetence. Now, the shield was gone and the storm was coming. On Wednesday afternoon, I put on my best leather boots and drove downtown to the office of Thomas Weber, the commercial property manager. His office was on the 4th floor of a polished steel and glass tower overlooking the city park. Thomas was a quiet man who had managed the building since 2008. He was the kind of administrator who lived by spreadsheets and took pride in keeping a perfectly organized desk. When I walked in, he looked up from his dual monitors, clearly surprised to see me. Arthur, he said, standing up to shake my hand. What brings you by? I heard some rumors about restructuring over at Apex Digital. I took a seat across from him and set a neat plastic folder on his desk. That is exactly what I am here to talk about, Thomas. I was let go yesterday. Thomas blinked, his expression turning to confusion. Fired after 21 years? That makes no sense. You practically built that office space from the studs up. Who is going to run their systems? That is their problem now, I said. But I am here as the primary leaseholder. As you know, the lease agreement for Suites 201 through 221 is under my name, Arthur Vance. Thomas turned to his computer, typing quickly. Yes, I see that. You signed the original 2002 lease, and all subsequent amendments are in your name as the lessee. Apex Digital has just been the occupant. Exactly, I said. I want to confirm that Apex Digital did not submit a written renewal notice by the July 1st deadline, which was 30 days prior to the August 1st expiration of the lease term. Thomas clicked through a few more screens. No, they did not. I assumed they were just transitioning to a month-to-month tenancy while their legal team prepared a new long-term deal. We have not received any written communication from Preston Cole or their finance department. Under Section 9B of the lease, since they failed to renew, the tenancy has converted to a month-to-month agreement. I am here to hand you this official 30-day notice of lease termination, effective September 5th. I pulled the document drafted by Ryan Finch and slid it across the desk. Thomas picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the legal language. His jaw went slightly slack. Arthur, you are terminating the lease? If you terminate, Apex Digital has no legal right to be in the building. They will have to clear out 3 floors of equipment, servers, and 200 employees in 30 days. This is going to be an absolute disaster for them. It is a business decision, Thomas, I said calmly. They wanted to modernize their operations, and this is part of my personal realignment. But I am not leaving you with an empty building. I have already lined up a new tenant. I opened the folder further and showed him a signed letter of intent from Morgan Callahan, the CEO of Bloom Haven, a rapidly growing wellness brand backed by green technology investors. They had been looking for a flagship downtown office for 6 months and were desperate for a space that already had heavy-duty power routing and HVAC infrastructure. Bloomhaven is willing to sign a 10-year lease. Starting September 10th, I explained, and they are willing to pay triple the monthly rate that Apex Digital has been paying under our old 2002 contract. Thomas looked at the letter of intent, then back at me. His face went from shock to a slow, professional appreciation. Triple the rate? That is a massive increase in building asset value. The owners will be thrilled. But Preston Cole is going to lose his mind when he finds out. He should have read the lease before he signed my termination letter. I replied, standing up. After leaving Thomas's office, I returned home and officially uploaded the lease termination and the upcoming eviction warning documents to the county court portal. Ryan had prepared everything. Because Apex Digital was legally just an occupant under my leasehold estate, the law was entirely on my side under California Civil Codes, Section 1946.1. Later that evening, as I was sitting on my porch, my phone buzzed with an email. It was from Oliver Pierce, CCing the legal department and the operations team. Dear Arthur, the email read, "We are writing to confirm that you have returned all physical and digital company property, including keys, access badges, and building documentation. Please reply to this email to confirm you have no outstanding company assets in your possession. Regards, Oliver Pierce, Director of HR." I stared at the screen for a minute. They still had no idea. They thought they had secured their facility by taking my 14 brass keys. They did not realize those keys only opened the doors, while I held the document that owned the floors beneath their feet. I hit reply all. Yes, I have returned all the property you asked for. I have also left some things you forgot I had. I hit send. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, the silence of the house felt heavy. I found myself thinking about Clara Cole, Preston's younger sister. Back in 2003, when Randy and I were working late nights trying to run network cables through the walls, Clara was just a little girl. She used to sit at my workbench, drawing pictures with crayons while we worked. I still had one of her drawings in the lease folder. A drawing of a red truck with my name on the side. I wondered if she knew what her brother had done, how he had turned his father's company into a cold, corporate machine that threw people away, but then I remembered my father's old Craftsman toolbox in the garage. He had worked at the same tool and die shop for 40 years, through mergers, recessions, and changes in management. He never complained. He just did the work right because his name was on the timesheet. I was not doing this out of anger, I realized. I was doing it because competence has a price, and loyalty must be earned. They had spent years taking my labor for granted, treating the foundation of their success as an invisible cost. The next morning, the county court approved the expedited filing. The 30-day clock was ticking, and the eviction notice was officially processed. The countdown had begun, and Apex Digital was sleeping right on top of a ticking clock. The 30 days passed in absolute silence. I spent my mornings drinking black coffee on my porch, working on a few project cars in my garage, and organizing my father's old socket wrenches. I did not receive a single phone call, email, or text message from anyone at Apex Digital. I knew exactly why. Thomas Weber had sent the official lease termination notice via certified mail to the company's registered address, but the mailroom at Apex Digital was run by a revolving door of temp workers. That month, the receptionist was a 19-year-old girl named Amber who wore glitter pen name tags and spent most of her shift on her phone. She had signed for the heavy green envelope, assumed it was standard junk mail, and tossed it into a pile of unread circulars behind the front desk. Preston Cole and Oliver Pierce were too busy in their executive suite, rehearsing presentations for Wall Street analysts, to notice that the legal foundation of their business had just been dissolved. On Monday morning, the 30-day notice period expired. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, 2 county sheriff deputies arrived at the building, accompanied by Thomas Weber and myself. Under California Code of Civil Procedure Section 1161, we had obtained a writ of possession after the holdover period. The deputies walked up to the main glass doors of Apex Digital on the second floor and posted a bright orange laminated document. It was a 72-hour notice to vacate the premises. The deputies used heavy-duty zip ties to secure it directly to the door handles, ensuring it could not be easily removed. At 8:30 a.m., Oliver Pierce arrived at the office, carrying his usual oat milk latte. When he reached the second-floor lobby and saw the giant orange sign zip-tied to the glass, he stopped dead in his tracks. His face went entirely pale. He dropped his coffee cup, the paper cup bursting and spilling brown liquid all over the carpet. Within 15 minutes, Preston Cole arrived, his hair messy and his headset still in his ear. He looked at the orange document, his eyes bulging in disbelief. He tried to rip it off the door, but the plastic zip ties held fast. By 9 a.m., Preston was in his office, screaming into his phone at Thomas Weber. I was standing in Thomas's office on the 4th floor, listening to the call on speakerphone. "What the hell is this, Thomas?" Preston yelled, his voice cracking with rage. "There is a sheriff's notice on my door. We have a major presentation for our investors tomorrow. You cannot do this to us, Mr. Cole," Thomas said in his flat, professional voice. "We sent your office a certified letter 30 days ago, informing you of the lease termination. The letter was delivered and signed for. You failed to respond or vacate the premises. Under state law, your tenancy is terminated, and the sheriff is enforcing the eviction." "We did not get any letter," Preston screamed. "This is illegal. I will sue you and the building owners." "You can talk to our legal counsel," Thomas said calmly. And then he hung up. By 10:30 a.m., the legal department at Apex Digital finally managed to pull the county court records. That was when they saw the name of the plaintiff who had filed the eviction. It was not the building owners. It was Arthur Vance. My phone did not ring until 7:42 p.m. that evening. I was in my garage, polishing the chrome handle of my father's 1952 toolbox. I looked down at the screen. The caller ID showed Preston Cole. I let it ring 3 times, then pressed speakerphone and set the device on the wooden workbench. "Vance speaking," I said. "Arthur!" Preston's voice exploded from the speaker, loud enough to echo in the quiet garage. "What the hell do you think you are doing? Are you insane? You are evicting my company." I picked up a rag and slowly wiped some grease off a socket wrench. "I am not evicting your company, Preston. I am simply terminating my lease." "You cannot do this," Preston yelled. "The company has been in that building for 21 years. My father helped start this company. We have 200 employees. We are weeks away from an IPO. This will ruin us." "Your father did help start the company," I said quietly. "And in 2002, when he could not get a bank to approve his credit, he asked me to sign the lease. I signed it. I renewed it. For 21 years, my name was the only one on that document. You and your HR director wanted to modernize the company, remember? You wanted to get rid of the old, inefficient parts. You wanted my keys. We did not know about the lease," Preston said, his voice dropping an octave, suddenly sounding desperate. "Nobody told us. We assumed the lease was under the corporate name." "That is your problem, Preston," I replied. You assumed that because I wore a denim shirt and worked with my hands, I did not understand contracts. You assumed that the guy who fixed your air conditioning was just an interchangeable part you could throw away with a misspelled severance letter. You did not even bother to check who owned the floor you were standing on." "Arthur, please," Preston said, his tone shifting from anger to pleading. "Let us work something out. We will pay you. We will double your old salary. We will sign a new agreement. Just call the sheriff off." I looked at the original 2002 lease folder on my desk. "It is too late, Preston. I have already signed a lease termination with the building owners, and the space has already been leased to a new tenant. They are paying triple your old rate, and they are moving in next week." "Ho?" Preston demanded. "Who did you lease it to?" "Bloomhaven," I said. "Morgan Callahan sends her regards." There was a long, dead silence on the line. I could hear Preston's heavy breathing. He knew exactly who Morgan Callahan was. She was their biggest local competitor, And now they were taking over the very offices Apex Digital had occupied for 2 decades. "You ruined us," Preston whispered. "No," I said. "I just stopped carrying you. Good luck with the move." I pressed the red button on the screen, cutting off his voice. I picked up my beer, took a slow drink, and looked at my father's toolbox. The work was done. The system had operated exactly as it was designed to. By Friday morning, the 72-hour notice had expired, and the absolute chaos of a forced eviction was in full swing down on 6th Street. The sidewalk was lined with stacks of monitors, server racks, and expensive desks wrapped in plastic. Moving trucks were backed up to the curb, their tailgates down. Apex Digital was in complete panic mode, trying to move 21 years of accumulated infrastructure into temporary storage facilities they had rented at the last minute for astronomical fees. I parked my truck across the street at 3:45 p.m. to watch the final act. I did not do it to gloat. I did it because when you build a system, you want to see how it performs under load. Oliver Pierce was standing on the curb, his Patagonia vest looking wrinkled and his hair disheveled. He was holding a clipboard, trying to direct a crew of hired movers who clearly did not care about corporate efficiency. Nearby, Preston Cole was pacing back and forth, sweat dripping from his forehead, arguing furiously with a moving supervisor. The supervisor was pointing at a stack of heavy file cabinets, shaking his head. In a sudden, explosive fit of rage, Preston picked up a metal folding chair and threw it. The chair struck the side of a rented U-Haul truck with a loud, hollow clang before bouncing onto the asphalt. Several passing pedestrians immediately pulled out their phones to record the tantrum. I knew that within 2 hours that video would be posted on every local tech blog and business forum in the state. For a company trying to launch an IPO, a video of the CEO necking a metal chair during a sheriff-enforced eviction was absolute poison. I rolled down my window as Morgan Callahan walked out of the building lobby. She looked bright, confident, and completely in control. She saw my truck, smiled, and walked over. "Arthur," she said, leaning against my passenger door. "We just signed the final papers. The space is incredible. You kept these floors in perfect condition. It is a solid building, Morgan," I said. "You just have to know how the systems run." "We will honor what you built here," she said. "And if we ever need help understanding the power layout, you will be the first person we call." "I appreciate that," I said, nodding. "Good luck with the move." I rolled up my window and drove away, taking the long way home past the old diner where Randy Cole and I had signed the first lease 21 years ago. It had been demolished and replaced by a corporate coffee shop years ago. Everything changes, but some rules remain the same. The biggest lesson I had learned was that loyalty without reciprocity is just free labor with a smile. I had spent 2 decades protecting that company, and they had discarded me the moment they thought they could save a few dollars. 2 days later, Dennis Miller, one of the facilities technicians who had worked under me, called my cell phone. He told me he had submitted his resignation that morning. "I could not stay there, Arthur," Dennis said. "The way they treated you was the final straw. If they can throw you out after 21 years, they will do the same to any of us. What are you going to do now?" I looked at the phone, then at my father's red Craftsman toolbox. "The same thing I have always done, Dennis," I said. "Just for people who remember to say thank you." Word travels fast in commercial real estate. By the next week, 3 other building managers downtown who had heard about the eviction reached out to me. They did not care about strategic realignment or modernizing operations. They cared about the fact that I knew how to run high-pressure chillers, diagnose electrical mains, and prevent $100,000 system failures. They wanted someone who actually understood what a load-bearing wall was. Within 3 months, I was working as an independent facilities consultant for 4 major office buildings downtown. I was making double what Apex Digital had paid me. I was setting my own hours, and I was working with managers who respected my experience. Every single consulting contract I signed was drafted by Ryan Finch, and I made sure my name was spelled right on every page. Yesterday evening, I stood in my garage with a hot cup of black coffee. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. On the wall, next to a framed photograph of my father in his machinist uniform and my very first paycheck stub from 1981, I mounted a small brass hook. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the original brass office key from 2002, and hung it on the hook. It caught the light, shining softly against the dark wood paneling. It was not a trophy of revenge. It was a reminder of what I had built and what I had taken back. Preston Cole and Oliver Pierce thought they could make me redundant. They thought that because I was old, I was obsolete. They forgot that you cannot build a tower without a foundation. They forgot that I was the load-bearing wall of their entire operation. And when the load-bearing wall walks away, the whole ceiling comes down. Turns out, competence never goes out of style.